Long after Zeus had cast down the Titans and secured his throne upon Olympus, the earth trembled once more. The gods thought the war for dominion was over, that no force remained strong enough to challenge their reign. But deep within the bowels of the world, something stirred, something more monstrous than anything they had ever faced before. This was no Titan, no giant, no beast of ordinary scale. This was Typhon, a creature so vast, so hideous, that even the Olympians themselves trembled at his sight. Ancient poets called him the deadliest of all beings, a storm given flesh, chaos given form. And unlike the Titans who sought to reclaim the heavens, Typhon's very existence was meant for one purpose: to utterly destroy the order Zeus had built. He would rise against Olympus with fire in his eyes, serpents coiling at his feet, and a roar that echoed the cries of every beast that had ever lived. The earth would shake, the heavens would burn, and for the first and only time, Zeus himself would nearly fall. This is the story of Typhon, the father of all monsters, the last and greatest terror of Greek mythology. The story of Typhon begins not in the skies of Olympus, but deep within the earth, in a time when resentment still festered after the Titanomachy. Zeus had defeated the Titans and bound them in the depths of Tartarus, their thunderous cries echoing beneath the ground. For the Olympians, it was the dawn of a new order. For Gaia, the ancient mother of all life, it was humiliation. She had birthed the Titans, and now she had watched them fall, chained and silenced by her own grandson. That wound cut deeper than mere defeat. Gaia was not just the earth in name, she was the very ground the gods stood upon, the soil mortals tilled, the mountains that touched the heavens. Every chain rattling in Tartarus was felt within her body, and with each groan of her imprisoned children, her fury grew. From this fury, she resolved to strike back. She would birth a child not of balance or harmony, but of vengeance. Unlike the Titans, who had once ruled, this new creation would be born only to destroy. Drawing upon the abyss of Tartarus, she summoned raw chaos and mingled it with her essence, pouring into it her anger and grief. From this union rose Typhon, a force not of order, but of catastrophe, the very opposite of Zeus's vision of a stable world. He was created not by love, but by rage and defiance. He was not meant to inherit the world like the Olympians, or even to rule it like the Titans had. He was born as a weapon. His very existence was a challenge, a living question hurled at Zeus. Could his reign truly endure against the most terrible force the earth could conjure? When Typhon first emerged, it was said the heavens dimmed, the earth quaked, and even the sea recoiled from his presence. He was not simply another child of the gods. He was their undoing, waiting to happen, the last and greatest terror to rise from the womb of the earth. The ancient poets painted Typhon as a nightmare made flesh, a being whose very form was proof that he was not meant to belong in the ordered world Zeus had forged. To describe him as a giant would be an understatement, for giants, at least, still resembled men. Typhon was something else entirely, a patchwork of horrors stitched together by rage and chaos. From the ground up, he was monstrous. His legs were not legs at all, but writhing coils of venomous serpents, each one alive, hissing and lashing out as though eager to strike anything that came near. His torso, vast and towering, seemed like that of a man at first glance, but grotesquely distorted, muscles bulging like cliffs of stone, veins burning with fire rather than blood. His height was said to reach the stars themselves, casting shadows that could stretch across mountains. But it was his heads, his countless heads, that set him apart from all other beings. Ancient writers claimed 100 dragon heads sprouted from his shoulders, each one terrible to behold. Some spewed flame, others black smoke, while still others hissed, shrieked, and roared with the cries of every beast that had ever walked the earth. One moment he might roar like a lion, the next howl like a wolf, or hiss like a serpent, until the very air was a storm of unnatural voices. His eyes blazed like firebrands, searing the horizon wherever he turned. From his mouths poured both flames and poisonous winds, a reminder that his very breath was meant to kill. Some claimed he bore wings, vast enough to darken the sky when unfurled, and when he moved them, storms were born on the wind. To see him was to be struck by terror, for his body was not simply large, it was wrong. He was an offense to the natural order, a living storm given shape. His footsteps split the earth, his gaze set forests aflame, and his voice was so terrible that the gods themselves trembled when they heard it. Typhon was not a monster that could be hunted or slain like a beast. He was chaos embodied, a force of nature with the mind to hate and the will to destroy. And though he had only just emerged into the world, he already carried within him the power to challenge the king of the gods himself. For all his terror and destructive force, Typhon did not stand alone. In the myths, he was paired with a consort who matched his monstrous nature, Echidna, the so-called mother of monsters. Half woman and half serpent, Echidna embodied the same duality of horror and allure. While her upper half was said to be a beautiful nymph, her lower body was a massive, coiling serpent. She dwelled in shadowed caves, away from both mortals and gods. A figure who, like Typhon himself, did not belong to the ordered world above. Together, Typhon and Echidna became the parents of a brood that would haunt the myths of heroes for generations. Their children were not ordinary beasts, but legendary terrors, each one destined to play a role in the trials of gods and men. Among them was Cerberus, the three-headed hound who guarded the gates of the underworld, snapping at any soul who dared to escape. Then came the Lernaean Hydra, the multi-headed serpent whose heads would regrow twice over whenever one was cut off, a challenge even for Heracles. They also produced the Chimera, a fire-breathing hybrid of lion, goat, and serpent, whose unnatural form mirrored her father's own twisted body. The monstrous Sphinx, known for strangling those who failed her riddles, is sometimes said to be their offspring as well, while the two-headed dog, Orthrus, and the serpent dragon Ladon, who guarded the golden apples of the Hesperides, were also counted among their brood. Through these children, Typhon's influence seeped into nearly every corner of Greek myth. Each new monster born from his line became an obstacle for heroes, a reminder that even though Zeus had risen to power, chaos had not been fully banished. When Perseus faced the sea serpent, when Heracles battled the Hydra, when Bellerophon slew the Chimera, they were not merely fighting beasts, they were wrestling with the legacy of Typhon himself. Echidna, unlike her mate, was not slain or imprisoned in myth. She survived, lurking in her lair, raising her monstrous brood and sending them out into the world. Typhon, therefore, was not only the great enemy of the gods, but the father of terrors that would plague both gods and mortals for generations. In this way, even after Typhon's downfall, his bloodline ensured that his shadow would stretch far beyond his own story. His children became the obstacles that tested the strength of heroes and the resilience of humanity itself. To understand Typhon, one must imagine the very forces of destruction given a will of their own. He was not simply a beast lashing out instinctively. He had purpose, cunning, and relentless hatred. The ancient poets describe him not as mindless, but as calculating, a creature who understood why he had been born, to rise against Zeus and tear down the fragile order of Olympus. His personality is painted in extremes. Typhon is merciless, fueled entirely by vengeance and rage. He is the embodiment of chaos unchained, unbending in his hatred of the Olympians. Unlike his children, who often acted as obstacles or guardians, Typhon's role was direct. He was the challenger to divine authority itself. Some accounts even suggest he mocked the gods, taunting them as they fled from his presence. As for his roles and associations, Typhon was often tied to the destructive forces of nature. His breath was said to scorch the earth like wildfire. His wings spawned hurricanes when they beat against the sky. His serpentine coils shook the land as though earthquakes followed his every step. And his imprisonment beneath Mount Etna would later explain the volcanic eruptions that devastated Sicily. Proof that even in defeat, he remained a force the world could not ignore. The Greeks also saw him as a personification of storms. His many voices, each echoing the cry of a different beast, resembled the howls of the wind. His fiery eyes mirrored lightning tearing across the heavens, while the roar of his heads could be likened to thunder rolling over mountains. In Typhon, every destructive element of the natural world was united into a single body. In terms of powers, he was said to rival Zeus himself. His strength was limitless, his fire no less fierce than the lightning bolts of Olympus. From his mouths poured venom and noxious winds, poisoning all who came near. He could unleash storms with a thought, darken the skies with smoke, and split the earth with his tread. Some traditions even described him as a shapeshifter, his countless heads capable of mimicking the voices of animals and men alike, a cruel parody of creation itself. Typhon was not just a monster then. He was the ultimate adversary, the natural answer to Zeus's rise, and the final test of whether order could truly withstand chaos. His personality, his powers, and his very presence marked him as more than an enemy of the gods. He was the greatest threat the cosmos had ever known. Hey everyone, before we continue, I've got some exciting news. My weekly video is now live on my new channel, Index Unknown. That's where I dive into the hidden side of history, the secrets, the theories, the conspiracies, the things they don't want you to know. The latest upload uncovers the mystery of Helltown, Ohio, a real town the government suddenly evacuated and sealed off. Locals still talk about toxic spills, mutant creatures, and secret experiments in the woods. Was it a safety measure, or something far darker? The link's below if you're interested. Check it out after this video. When Typhon finally rose against Olympus, the world itself seemed to recoil in terror. The air turned black with storm and smoke. The oceans convulsed. The mountains cracked open like eggshells, spewing rivers of molten rock. From the deepest caverns to the highest peaks, every corner of the earth trembled beneath the monster's ascent. The Olympians, who had once faced the Titans and claimed victory, now felt something they had never known before: dread. This was no rebellion, no war for succession or pride. It was the unmaking of creation itself. From the depths of the underworld, Typhon rose like a living storm. Wherever his coils touched the ground, the land split apart, rivers boiled, and forests turned to ash. The Olympians scattered. Some fled to distant lands. Others hid behind mountain ranges and seas, abandoning Olympus as the sky itself fell into chaos. Only Zeus remained. From the summit of Olympus, he raised his hand to the heavens, calling down storms unlike any ever seen. Thunder rolled like a god's heartbeat. Lightning tore the sky open, and the clouds became oceans of flame. Zeus hurled bolt after bolt, each strike shaking the world to its roots. But Typhon did not fall. Instead, the monster laughed, a terrible, echoing sound that split the sky in two. His wings spread wide, casting the world in shadow. From his many mouths came torrents of fire, smoke, and venom. The heavens burned and the air turned to poison. Mountains melted like wax beneath his feet as he surged toward Olympus. When the two powers collided, creation itself seemed to tear apart. The wind screamed with the force of their blows. Thunder and flame intertwined, forming storms that scorched the horizon. Lightning met fire. Sky met earth. And in that instant, it was said that even Gaia wept, for her child and her world were both being ripped apart. At first, Zeus appeared to hold the upper hand. He struck Typhon with bolt after bolt, hurling him back across the mountains of Thrace. Rivers rose from the impact, valleys collapsed, and the sky blazed with unending light. The monster roared but stood firm, his wounds glowing like molten rock. Then, as the battle wore on, Typhon's fury grew more terrible. In the account of Apollodorus, Typhon at last overcame the king of the gods. Zeus was caught in a storm of serpents. Typhon's coils wrapped around him, crushing even the divine bones of the thunderer. The god fought back, hurling lightning in every direction, but the flames rebounded, swallowed by Typhon's monstrous breath. Then came the unthinkable. Typhon struck Zeus to the ground and tore the sinews from his body, the very essence of his power. leaving him crippled and helpless. The king of the heavens, once the conqueror of Titans, was bound and broken. Typhon carried his fallen enemy to a shadowed cave in Cilicia, far to the east, where the she-dragon Delphine was set to guard him. There, Zeus lay in torment, his body unable to move, his power stolen. The skies fell silent. The thunder ceased. The earth groaned beneath Typhon's dominion. For the first time, Olympus was without its king. But all was not lost. In secret, Hermes and Pan, the half-man and half-goat, crept into the lair. Guided by trickery and stealth, they evaded Delphine's gaze, recovered the stolen sinews, and restored them to Zeus's broken body. With his strength renewed, Zeus rose once more, now filled with wrath greater than any storm. The heavens trembled as he ascended, his eyes alight with pure lightning. The second battle dwarfed the first. From Mount Haemus to the plains of Sicily, gods and mortals alike watched as sky and earth collided. Zeus's thunderbolts fell like meteors, igniting forests, melting stone, and turning rivers to steam. Typhon's fire blazed so fiercely that the seas began to boil. The clash of their powers tore the constellations from the night sky and sent them spinning into new forms. The monster struck with mountains in his hands, hurling them like stones. Zeus shattered them mid-air with lightning. Whole continents quaked beneath their feet. The heavens bled light. At last, Zeus summoned all the storms of creation and hurled a single thunderbolt greater than any before. It struck Typhon squarely in the chest. The monster howled, a sound that echoed for 9 days across the earth, before his wings caught fire and his serpentine body began to collapse in on itself. Zeus did not hesitate. He drove Typhon deep into the earth, pinning him beneath an avalanche of burning rock. He sealed the wound of the world with a mountain, Mount Etna, pressing it down like a lid over a raging flame. When the dust settled, the skies cleared for the first time in ages. The seas grew calm, the wind softened, and the light of day returned. Olympus stood, scarred, but standing. But though Zeus had prevailed, he bore the memory of defeat. His arm still ached where the sinews had been torn, and his pride carried a wound that no thunderbolt could mend. And beneath the earth, Typhon stirred. His rage burned beneath the crust like molten fire. His voice rumbled through the mountain's heart, and every tremor, every eruption, every storm that swept across the world, all were said to be the fury of the monster who would never die, clawing forever at the walls of his prison. Not all traditions tell the tale of Typhon's rise in the same way. In some versions, when the monster stormed toward Olympus, the gods did not stand bravely beside Zeus. Instead, panic seized them. They abandoned the heights of their golden thrones and fled far from Greece, seeking refuge in the fertile valley of the Nile. But fear alone was not enough to save them. To hide from Typhon's pursuit, they shed their divine forms and cloaked themselves in the shapes of animals. Apollo spread his wings as a hawk, flashing through the sky. Hermes took the form of an ibis, sharp-beaked and clever. Artemis slipped into the shadows as a cat, her movements silent and precise. Hera lowered her head as a white cow, horns gleaming in the sun, while Aphrodite vanished beneath the river as a darting fish. Ares bristled as a wild boar, tusks gleaming, and Hephaestus labored as a heavy ox, unyielding in strength. Demeter thundered across the plains as a horse, mane flying in the wind. Dionysus bounded about as a goat, wild and capricious, while Poseidon strode as a ram, horns curling like waves. In this retelling, the Olympians did not look like gods at all. They were scattered across the land as beasts, their divine radiance hidden, the rulers of Olympus reduced to trembling shapes in the wild. It was a striking image, the entire pantheon dissolving into the animal kingdom, cowering in a foreign land while Zeus alone prepared to face Typhon. Later, storytellers saw in this myth the roots of Egypt's animal-headed gods, a way to explain how Apollo, Hermes, and the others might have been remembered in another culture. The Greeks believed their gods had been disguised there, and in time, those disguises had become divine forms in their own right. But to the Egyptians, their gods had always existed. They were not borrowed, not echoes, but original powers of the Nile. The parallel went further. Typhon himself was compared to Set, the Egyptian god of storms, violence, and chaos. Like Typhon, Set was an enemy even among the gods, a figure of disruption who murdered Osiris and raged against order. Both were stormbringers, both were destroyers, and both embodied the dread of chaos rising against stability. Through these connections, Typhon's shadow stretched beyond Greece. He was no longer only the terror of Olympus, but also a figure mirrored in foreign lands, his presence woven into the fears and myths of different peoples. Chaos, after all, was not just a Greek concern. It was universal. Like many figures of Greek mythology, the story of Typhon was not fixed. Different poets, storytellers, and philosophers painted him in their own way, leaving behind a patchwork of traditions that sometimes contradicted one another. Even his parentage was disputed. In Hesiod's telling, Typhon was the child of Gaia and Tartarus, conceived as the Earth's vengeance after the defeat of the Titans. But other versions claimed Hera alone brought him into being, birthing him without Zeus as an act of defiance, driven by jealousy at her husband's many divine offspring. In these accounts, Typhon was less the Earth's wrath and more Hera's rebellion, a son raised not by nature but by spite. His battle with Zeus also shifts, depending on the source. Hesiod describes a direct confrontation. Zeus unleashes his lightning bolts, and Typhon is crushed, his body buried beneath the earth. There is no moment of doubt, no stumble, only Zeus's triumph. Yet in Apollodorus's Bibliotheca, the tale is darker. Here, Typhon actually defeats Zeus, tearing the sinews from his body and imprisoning him in a cave guarded by Delphin. Only with the aid of Hermes and Pan is Zeus restored, and only then does he finally overwhelm Typhon in battle. These variations reveal something rare. In some traditions, the king of the gods could be beaten, if only for a time. Other writers blurred the line between Typhon and the giants, the enemies of the Olympians in the Gigantomachy. To them, he was not a separate foe, but one of many born to challenge Zeus. Later poets, like Nonnus, stretched the battle into an epic of cosmic scale, describing whole landscapes torn apart in the struggle, as though the very world itself was caught in their war. As centuries passed, Typhon moved beyond mythology into symbolism. To philosophers and allegorists, he became more than just a monster. He was a metaphor. To some, he represented the destructive side of nature, the storms, quakes, and volcanic eruptions that tore apart human lives without warning. To others, he was the embodiment of unrestrained rage, a reminder of what happens when chaos is allowed to consume order. In certain interpretations, Typhon was even cast as a foreign god, a barbarian deity from beyond Greece, a convenient symbol of all that lay outside the familiar world. This constant reshaping of Typhon tells us something important. He was too powerful, too unsettling, to be confined to a single story. To the Greeks, he was both monster and metaphor, a living nightmare and an idea. He was chaos in its purest form, and chaos was a fear that no culture, no age, could ever escape. The world grew still after the war. The thunder faded, the fire cooled, and the mountain that sealed Typhon turned from molten rock to stone. Yet the silence that followed was uneasy, like the hush that lingers after a scream. Beneath Mount Etna, the monster did not die. His body lay broken, but his breath remained, trapped, seething, and waiting. When the winds howled across the Aegean and tore sails from ships, the ancients said it was the breath of Typhon, escaping through cracks in the earth. The gentle breezes, the anemoi, were Zeus's gift. But the violent tempests, the gales that shredded masts and dragged ships into whirlpools, were Typhon's offspring, born of rage and confinement. In the valleys of Sicily, the ground trembled beneath farmers' feet. They claimed it was the monster shifting in his sleep, his coils wrapping tighter in the dark. Offerings of wine and bread were left at the mountain's base, not in worship, but in fear, a plea for him to stay asleep just one more day. Every earthquake, Every eruption, every storm at sea was said to be his vengeance reaching upward. But Typhon's legacy was not buried entirely. Through his union with Echidna, he fathered the monsters that haunted every corner of Greek myth. Each bore a spark of their father's defiance, a fragment of the storm he left behind. Heroes rose to slay them, but even in their triumphs, they could not destroy what Typhon represented. His spirit lived on in every challenge that tested gods and mortals alike, the eternal struggle between order and chaos, between the heavens and the deep. The Egyptians called him Set, god of deserts and storms. Others saw him as the storm itself, not a creature, but an idea, a force that rises whenever arrogance reaches too high, whenever creation forgets its foundation. Typhon's legacy, then, is not just that of a monster who was defeated. It is that of a terror never fully silenced, a warning carved into myth that chaos cannot be erased, only contained.